Hello there, film enthusiasts. Welcome back to another thrilling edition of Tim and Tom's Film Nights, where Thomas and I engage in passionate discussions about our favorite celluloid creations. Tonight, we have quite the treat for you as we delve into the world of horror slasher films. Specifically, we will be examining 2006's I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer, standalone sequel to the popular franchise.
Well, Timothy, I must say I am not particularly excited about this movie. The original was good, but it didn't really need any sequels. And I feel like they're just milking this cash cow for all it's worth. But we shall see what the film has to offer.
We should at least give it a chance before passing judgment, don't you think? So let's start by discussing the plot. The film revolves around a group of teenagers who stage a prank involving a killer fisherman legend, only to have the prank go horribly wrong when one of their friends dies in a tragic accident. A year later, they begin receiving mysterious messages from someone claiming to be the fisherman himself. What do you think about this premise?
I don't know, Timothy. It sounds like they've just taken a tired old trope and added some supernatural elements to it. It's been done before, and honestly, I think the film would have been more interesting if it had stuck with its roots as a simple slasher flick rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. But we'll see how it plays out, right?
Well, you're not exactly selling me on this one, Tom, but let's give the film some benefit of the doubt, shall we? It could have some redeeming qualities that we haven't yet seen in the trailer. Besides, I do enjoy a good old-fashioned slasher flick every now and then. So who am I to judge?
All right, Timothy, all right. But if it turns out to be just another generic slasher with a gimmicky hook-wielding killer, you're not going to hold it against me, are you?
I'll reserve my final judgment after we've watched the entire film. But I do have a question for you, Tom. Did you know that this movie was originally supposed to be a reboot of the original I Know What You Did Last Summer franchise?
I'm shocked, Timothy, shocked. No. Seriously, though, I didn't know that. It does make a bit more sense now why they decided to go with a completely new cast and setting, instead of trying to bring back the original stars. But honestly, I think they made the right choice in going the standalone sequel route rather than attempting to revive a dying franchise. As for trivia, did you know that this film was actually shot in Canada, specifically in Vancouver and Whistler? And despite being set during the 4th of July holiday, they had to do some clever editing tricks to make it look like they were celebrating Independence Day properly. It just goes to show what talented filmmakers can accomplish with a little bit of creativity and a lot of post-production magic.
Well, I must admit that I am impressed by their dedication to making it seem authentic, even if they had to shoot in Canada. Now let's move on to the special effects or filming techniques used in this movie. From what I've seen so far, they didn't exactly spare any blood or gore, did they?
No, Timothy. They definitely didn't shy away from the gruesome side of things. In fact, some of the effects were reportedly quite realistic, which understandably led to some on-set trauma for the cast and crew members. But you know me, I love a good splatterfest every now and then. As for the filming techniques, they used a combination of practical effects and CG to bring the fisherman's hook hand scenes to life. It's said that the hook itself was actually quite heavy, so much so that stuntman Don Shanks had to have his arm in a harness during filming. But enough about the blood and guts. Let's switch gears and talk about the location scouting. The movie was supposedly filmed at several real-life locations, including an actual carnival in British Columbia and a ski resort in Whistler. Do you think they captured the eerie atmosphere of a quintessential American summer town, Tom?
Well, I am not too sure about that, Tom. From what I've seen so far, it doesn't exactly scream quintessential American summer town to me. But let's reserve our judgments for after we've watched the entire film. Now, let's talk about the casting choices. The film has a mix of known and lesser-known actors. with some familiar faces from TV shows like Dawson's Creek and Beverly Hills 90,210. Did you have any favorite performances or moments from these actors?
Well, Timothy, I must say that I was pleasantly surprised by some of the performances in this film, especially from the veteran actors like Don Shanks reprising his role as the Fisherman and the always entertaining David Payetkow as Colby. As for the rest of the cast, they did a decent job considering the lackluster material they had to work with. The standout performances for me were definitely Brooke Nevin as Amber and Tori DeVito as Zoe. They managed to bring some much-needed depth and relatable vulnerability to their characters, which helped keep me engaged throughout the movie. Now let's talk about the special effects in this film. I've already mentioned the gory scenes involving the hook hand killer, and they certainly lived up to the movie's R rating. The CG blood and gore effects were convincing enough to make even the most hardened horror fan cringe at times. But what really impressed me was the practical effects team's work on the actual hook hand prop itself. It reportedly weighed a whopping 8 pounds, which is insane considering how often it was used in the film. The blood and gore aside, I also appreciated the attention to detail in capturing the frigid winter atmosphere of a Colorado mountain town. The snow-covered landscapes and chilly cinematography added an extra layer of chilling realism to the already gruesome proceedings. Now let's switch gears once again, Timothy, and talk about the music in this film. It's not often that horror films receive much praise for their soundtracks, but I thought the score by Frederick Halsab was actually quite hauntingly beautiful at times. The eerie piano compositions and choral arrangements perfectly complemented the tension and suspense in each scene, elevating the overall cinematic experience for me. So, Timothy, what are your thoughts on the special effects and filming techniques used in this movie? Do you think they captured the essence of a quintessential American summer town? And finally, do you have any favorite moments or performances from the cast that stood out to you?
Well, I must admit that I found the opening scene quite chilling and sets the tone for the entire film. The use of shadows and long, ominous shots of the carnival grounds, interspliced with a montage of the teenagers' mundane lives, effectively establishes a sense of unease that lingers throughout the movie. As for the performances, I agree with you. Tom Brooke Nevin as Amber and Tori DeVito as Zoe were standouts. Their chemistry on screen was believable, which made their respective fates even more tragic. On that note, let's talk about the characterization in the film. While some critics have pointed out that the characters are archetypes, the nerdy geek, the popular girl, etc., I found them to be relatable and well-rounded enough to care about their fates. The writers did a commendable job delving into each character's motivations and fears, adding layers of complexity that elevate the otherwise predictable plot. As for the special effects, I concur with you, Tom. They were impressive, particularly in the scenes involving the hook hand killer. The practical effects team deserves praise for creating a realistic-looking prop that could withstand the rigors of filming and delivering convincing gore, scenes that would make even the most hardened horror fans cringe. Now, let's switch gears once again and talk about the artistic influence of this film. While it is part of a long-standing horror franchise, I believe it carved out its own niche within the slasher genre by blending elements of supernatural horror with classic slasher tropes. The use of dream sequences and flashbacks, along with the reveal of the killer's identity, pays homage to seminal slasher films like Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, while also adding its own unique twist on the formula. In conclusion, while Always Know What You Did Last Summer isn't a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, it does deliver on its primary objective, providing cheap thrills and chills to horror enthusiasts. It certainly has its flaws, but when judged solely as a genre piece, it stands tall among its peers. So, Tom, what do you think? Do you see any other notable influences or techniques used in this film that stood out to you?
Well, Timothy, I think you've already touched upon one significant influence in your analysis earlier, the slasher genre, and specifically franchises like Friday the 13th and Nightmare on Elm Street. You'll always know what you did last summer doesn't shy away from its roots, borrowing heavily from these predecessors. However, what sets this film apart is its clever blending of supernatural elements with classic slasher tropes. The use of dream sequences and the revelation of a twisted backstory add layers of depth to what could have been just another generic slasher flick. Furthermore, the setting itself, a quintessential American small town, evokes nostalgia for the golden age of horror cinema, recalling classics like Halloween and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. In terms of techniques, I'd argue that one particularly effective technique used in this film is its masterful use of suspense and tension. Director Sylvain White does an exceptional job of building up to each gruesome kill scene, heightening the viewer's anticipation with skillfully crafted jump scares and moments of silence punctuated by sudden bursts of violence. The film also makes clever use of POV shots, often adopting the killer's perspective, adding a layer of claustrophobia and unease to already tense situations. Additionally, the filmmakers utilize practical effects rather than relying heavily on CG, which adds an extra layer of authenticity to the gory spectacles. Overall, while You'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer might not be hailed as a cinematic masterpiece, it certainly deserves credit for its skillful blending of classic horror elements and innovative techniques. Its ability to pay homage to its slasher roots while carving out its own niche within the genre is commendable. So, Timothy, do you agree with my assessment? Are there any other notable influences or techniques that stood out to you in this film?
Well, Tom, I must admit, after our thorough discussion, I can see your points about the film's techniques and homages to classic horror films. While it may not have been my personal cup of tea, I do appreciate the skillful blending of genres and the effective use of suspense and tension throughout. As for the gore scenes, while they might be a turnoff for some, they were executed, well, thanks to the talented practical effects team. In conclusion, I'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer is a mediocre slasher flick that does its job competently enough. It won't be hailed as a masterpiece anytime soon, but it certainly provides entertainment for die-hard horror fans like ourselves who relish in cheap thrills and chill. So, Tom, do you have anything else to add before we wrap up our discussion on this particular entry in the slasher canon?
Well, Timothy, I think we've pretty much covered everything there is to say about You'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer. It's a decent enough watch if you're in the mood for some mindless entertainment, but it doesn't really bring anything new or innovative to the table. The storyline is predictable and cliché, the characters are forgettable, and the ending leaves much to be desired. However, as I mentioned earlier, credit where credit is due, the film does have its moments of suspense and tension, thanks to the skilled direction of Sylvain White. Additionally, the practical effects team deserves praise for their realistic-looking gore scenes. So overall, while it's not a must-watch in the horror genre, You'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer is a passable time killer if you're looking for some cheap thrills and chills. So, folks, that concludes our discussion on this 2006 slasher flick. Did you enjoy our take on You'll Always Know What You Did Last Summer? Let us know in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video with your friends who love horror movies just as much as we do. Until next time, happy haunting.